Hello, welcome to another video. I hope you are stat-loving humans because this is going to be looking back at my year in books of 2021, looking at the books I've read, the books I loved, the books I hated, and the general stats around them. So as I said, this is going to be a little bit of a year in review, but at the time of filming this, it is not yet the end of December. What day is it? It's the 22nd, so I still have a week left, pretty much, of the month, just a little bit over. So I may still finish more books this year, and I'm sure I will finish more books, but as of right now, these are the books that I'm going to be talking about. I love stats. I feel like they make me feel more productive. I'm not reading to be productive, but it is a benefit for me of reading. It makes me feel productive, and being productive makes me feel good. So keeping these kind of stats and just having a look at the end of the year is something that I really enjoy. I know it's not going to be for everybody, and I obviously do just read for fun, but this is just something I enjoy off the back of it. So I've compiled a couple of stats from different platforms that I use. This would be Corpile, which is a rating system that G from Book Roast created that helps you rate your books, but is also a way of logging your books as well, so it's all on a spreadsheet. I would look that one up if you want to know more. There's a video where G explains it a lot better than I can in 10 seconds. I also use Goodreads, which is an Amazon-owned platform, and I've just been using since I started logging my reading in this way. I think since about 2014, maybe 13, but that's kind of one that I've just always used. I'm also using Literal, which is a newer platform, really nice minimalist platform. I have worked on an ad with Literal before. I'm also using Storygraph, which I actually only 2 weeks ago started using and imported all my Goodreads library from. And I'm intrigued by it. It gives you some interesting stats, which, as I've said, I like, but I haven't really dug about in it properly yet to see whether I really like the interface or not. And then I also use Basmo, which isn't really going to be one that I'm using to create these stats as such, but again, that's one I worked on an ad for. That isn't really a logging app as much as it is an app that kind of helps you to read more, because you can log a session of reading, and for me, I use it because I can see how long it took me to read X percentage of a book, so I can work out how long it would take me to read the rest of the book. So I find it helpful from that perspective, but I don't think that one's going to weigh in here, but it's one that I use. You're probably thinking, why am I using so many? I feel like it might be an interesting idea as a video to compare all the different ones I use, so if you would like that, let me know. The reason I'm using so many is for two different reasons. One, I'm trying to work out which one I prefer, because lots of people talk about lots of different ones and I wanted to try them out for myself. But two, they do all offer different things, and I like that about them. Goodreads I think I just use because I always have, and there's so much history on there for me. Storygraph I'm using at the moment because of the stats. Literal has more of a community feel to it, and then Corpile is just for my logging. That's just for me, really. So yeah, I'm aware it's a lot. I've also started doing mini reviews on my Patreon that's different from the reviews I post elsewhere, so I'm kind of writing for there as well, but it's fun, it's great, it gives me time to reflect, and that is what this video is all about, reflecting on 2021. So I have broken down my stats. I've got kind of my overview of stats. I've got it all on my iPad. I've got my overview of stats, and then I've kind of broken it down a little bit more detail. So for the overview, we're going to look at the kind of year as a whole and just look at everything and how that went for me. So on all these platforms that I've mentioned, you can set yourself reading goals. So on Storygraph and Goodreads, my reading goal was 60 books. Now I smashed this, I want to say in like June, July time, and I didn't change the goal. I did not increase it. I know that some people do choose to increase their goal once they hit it, but for me, it wasn't necessarily about hitting the goal, it was just about having the goal, and then every time I go past it, on Goodreads, it shows you how many books ahead of schedule you are, and that makes me feel good. So I hit the 60 book goal. It was definitely below the halfway point of the year, so it must have been around June time, I think. May, June time, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was successful, so that was good. And then I went on to, at this point now, having read 132 books for the year, which is the most I have ever read in a year. I've slowly increased. Last year I think I read like 102 or something, so I read almost 30 more, probably by the time this year is out, more than 30 more books this year, which is just, I don't really know how I've done this. Obviously we started the year in lockdown for 3 or 4 months, so I think that really did help, but also I've been doing a lot more this year because when we did open up, I was able to do the things I hadn't been able to do for quite a long time. So I felt like I would have read less, but apparently not. I genuinely think that Basmo, the app I mentioned, has helped me read a lot more as well, because it motivates me to see how much I've read on a certain day, and you also have goals to beat. This is not an ad for Basmo, but as I said, I did work with them on an ad, and I've just used them ever since. But that is a really good app for me because I'm almost competing with myself, and I know, again, it's not a competitive sport reading, but I do quite enjoy that element of trying to beat like how many pages I read last week or yesterday, or just kind of trying to beat how much time I've been sat down reading. But I find it really valuable to see how long I've got left in a book, and I like that on my Kindle, but I don't often read on my Kindle, so Basmo kind of allows me to work out how much time I have left in the book without having to be reading it digitally. So I know 132 books is quite a lot, and I also don't know if I'm ever going to read that many books in a year again, because it was almost too much. I think I was almost motivated to read that much because of how much I've been creating content this year as well, and that's only going to increase, so maybe I will keep reading that many. I don't know. But pages read from the 132 books, that comes out as 45,807, which is a lot of pages. That's a lot. I would be interested to see how high that would be stacked, but am I going to disrupt every single book in here to show you? I'm really sorry, but I'm probably not, because half of them are probably trapped behind that Christmas tree. Anyway, so my average rating I'm actually surprised by in a kind of good way, because I thought I was being too generous with my ratings this year. Thought I was giving out a lot of 4 and 5 stars, and I thought it would get to the end of the year and I would look back and be like, why was I so generous? And whilst I do use CorePile, obviously you are still entering those numbers in yourself, so you are kind of pushing it towards a certain rating. But my average rating is 3.7 stars. So we're nearly at the 4-star cusp, but we're still in the 3 stars. I also feel so mean when I rate books 3 stars, because for me, 3 stars doesn't mean I didn't enjoy a book. It just wasn't like, oh my God, 4 stars worthy. 3 stars is pretty much like, it was good, but it was just average good, whereas 2 stars for me is I didn't enjoy this. So 3.7 isn't too bad. I don't know whether I want that number to be low or high. That's just a true reflection of how I've enjoyed these books, I think. And then when it comes to breaking down the reading months, so I'm interested to see whether this follows suit into next year as well, because January was my highest read month this year. So I read 20 books in January, and I read 6 books in May, which is my lowest read month. Now I think I went into January with the real motivation of like, I'm gonna read this, this and this, and it's gonna be an amazing start to the year, and it was, and it really kicked it off well. However, now I only remember how horrible it was filming that wrap up for the month. Like, that was really difficult to film because I couldn't remember everything. I felt overwhelmed, and I just remember sitting there with 20 books trying to like go through them all and just feeling a bit lost. And I think that made me reflect on the fact that maybe 20 books for me personally was just a bit too many, and it just felt like I couldn't properly retain them, which I didn't want from what I was reading. So from that point onwards, I never read 20 books again in 1 month. I think I came close. Did I read? Hang on, I want to check that. No, okay, so I'm looking at my core pile now. I came close. I read 16 books in both March and October. October, I was on a roll with reading spooky books. I think one night I read 5 books in one night because I'd got like a load of graphic novels and things. And in a minute, you'll see that that's reflected in my stats as well. But yeah, that was an interesting breakdown of months, I feel like. I definitely noticed that when I had the higher reading months, I then deliberately slowed it down the next month. Not because I felt slumpy, just because for me, it was just too much. It was too much. Okay, so now we're gonna go into a little bit more of a breakdown of the books that I read, the genres, the age groups, and what I rated the books. So genre-wise, I'm not really that surprised with what's come out here. So on top, with 33% of the books I read, I have got fantasy. I'm not surprised, although at the same time, recently, I don't think I've read a great deal of fantasy. Now this is all, these stats coming from CorePile, so there isn't an option to list multiple genres under CorePile, so some of these might be a contemporary fantasy or a thriller fantasy or a horror fantasy, but I would log what I personally thought was the main genre. So 33% fantasy, 15% contemporary kind of surprises me. That's the next biggest percentage. Now I don't often read a lot of romance contemporary type of books, and if it was something like a contemporary thriller, I would have listed it as a thriller, not a contemporary. So the fact that I've got 15% contemporary, I don't even know what they are. Like, I don't know what these 15% are. I can think that I read Beth O'Leary this year, but that is it. That is the only one I can think of. Sophia Khan's Not Obliged. I also read 2. That's a duology with those are contemporary romance, but it's just not a genre I reach towards quite as often, so that one genuinely surprises me. Actually, I think because I've read books like Wonderland and Stay Another Day by Juno Dawson, for example, that are contemporary but not romance, I kind of forget to include them in that box because they feel such a different type of book for me. I don't know why. They are still contemporary and they're not fantasy at all, but maybe in my head contemporary links to romance and I need to kind of remove that link because if it was romance, I would categorize it as romance. This is partially the flaws that comes from categorizing it myself, but when I looked at the genres on Storygraph, they were just so off. Like, I think it was categorizing YA as a genre on Storygraph, and I don't think that's right. YA is an age group, not a genre. There's YA fantasy, YA thriller, there's so many different types of genres within YA that I don't think you can categorise it as a genre on its own. So I went with core pile instead of storygraph for this, which means these categorisations are all what past Beth did, and clearly the contemporary is throwing me. So next in these next two are 12%, both of them taking up 12%. So we've got thriller, mystery, horror, and I've kind of grouped that as one because I think sometimes they can overlap and it can be difficult to kind of differentiate between them because they just have so many aspects that are similar. Horror is a little separate, but at the same time I've kind of just popped them all in there together, and that is 12% of the books I've read. And then the other 12%, obviously there are other percentages outside of these, I've just picked like the 4 biggest percentages. The other 12% is graphic novels, which surprises me. I think it ended up being something like 16 books I read this year were graphic novels. And actually, I thought I would have read less than that, and I'm kind of pleased with that because I wanted to read more graphic novels this year, and it's been something I'm getting more into. And I really enjoyed reading graphic novels. I reread the first in the Heartstopper series this year and then read all the other ones and I absolutely loved them, and I'm now like completely on board that train and cannot wait for the 5th one coming out in 2022. I keep saying this year, but I don't know whether I'm putting this live at the end of 2021 or at the start of 2022. Anyway, right now I'm filming it and it's this year. So yeah, more graphic novels, which is interesting. I don't know what my stat for that was last year, but I'm pleased with that. So the breakdown from fiction to non-fiction doesn't surprise me at all. 95% fiction, 5% non-fiction. I am not a big non-fiction reader in terms of sitting down in the same way I would with a fiction. I'm much more likely to dive in and out of a non-fiction, which means often I don't finish the whole book and I just kind of have it as a constantly currently reading, which means that a lot of the non-fiction that I've got a bookmark in at the moment isn't going to be seen within these stats because I've never marked it as complete on any of the sites that I used to log my reading. So yeah, the 5% that I have completed are mostly feminist type of non-fiction. One that I did read this year that did include feminism but also looked at other topics was Disfigured. That was fantastic. That talks about how villains in fairy tales are represented and just is so interesting, and talks about disability. That was really great. That's one that stands out as being really interesting. So that is one of those 5% non-fictions, and I just can't even think what the other ones would be. I read The Vagina Monologue. I don't know. A couple of feminist ones, and I can't remember what else, guys. Okay, next we have the age categories. So at 2% we have got new adult, 5% middle grade, 42% YA and 51% adult. So for me, new adult, I think, because that seems to be like a newer age category almost that people are talking about within like the last 4 to 5 years, which really isn't that new anymore, I suppose, but books that I'm reading don't necessarily come with a clear layout of like, this is YA, this is new adult, this is adult. So I'm always thinking like, is it YA or is it new adult? And I think it depends for me on the kind of themes it deals with and how much it verges into the adult while still having kind of borderline new adult aged characters. So yeah, 2% there. The 5% middle grade I thought would be higher, but actually thinking about it, I think it's because the middle grade I've read I've absolutely loved, so I thought I'd read more, but actually it's just that the ones I have read I thought were brilliant, such as Amari and the Night Brothers, fantastic. I'm really pleased that adult has got almost 10% more books that I've read than young adult, because I honestly, unfortunately, am going off young adult books. And as I said earlier, they're not a genre. This isn't me categorizing them within a genre. It's just generally the older I get, the more I'm relating obviously to the adult characters in books. And I don't think that that is necessarily true for everybody, that you don't relate to the characters you're not the same age as, and that isn't true for me. However, the experiences that the characters in the adult books are going through are the experiences I'm going through at the moment, and I think that makes me feel less alone. So whilst I do really enjoy reading middle grade and I do really enjoy reading young adult, and I can absolutely read about characters that are not my age, I don't think there's any age limit on when you can read books. It's just, for me, I think at the moment where I feel, because I'm living alone and I'm kind of at a stage in life where people are going off and doing different things, to find relatable characters in books for me is really special. So I think that's reflected in reading 51% adult fiction. Then series and standalone is pretty much neck and neck. 47% series, 53% standalone. Standalone are just winning. I actually prefer standalone books because I think there's less pressure on me to remember every single detail to prepare for a sequel that comes out in 2 years' time, for example. And also, more series I read, the more rereads I have to do because I cannot remember what happens. And I just don't have time for that at the moment with rereads. There are so many books on my shelves I want to get to that rereads, they're just a bit daunting. Although saying that, I've actually done 7 rereads this year, and that is pretty much because of series coming out that I needed to recap on. So page number breakdown, I have read 57% 300 to 499 page books, 31% under 300 page books, and 12% 500 and over. So I think that's kind of an interesting breakdown. I'm leaning towards the bigger books, which I think reflects the fact that the genres I'm preferring have those kind of bulkier plot lines to them that do require the bigger books. And obviously fantasy generally does tend to be bigger, which I am reading more of because there's so much to put in fantasy that usually, I feel like if I think about most of the fantasy on my shelf, they're all around 400 plus pages. So again, that kind of makes sense. I realise this iPad is kind of like giving me a light box, isn't it? Ooh. Anyway, the second to last stat to talk about is my most read authors. Now, this kind of surprised me, but also now I've thought about it, doesn't surprise me. So my most read authors are Sarah J Maas, Samantha Shannon, Alice Osman, and Leigh Bardugo. So Sarah J Maas, I think, has managed to creep on in there because I actually reread the ACOTAR series this year because we had A Court of Silver Flames coming out. So that means I'd read all of those ones. But then actually, did I read anything else? So that's 5 Sarah J Maas books I've read this year. So okay, alright, that's not as many as I would have expected for like a top most read author. Samantha Shannon, I reread The Bone season to prepare for The Mask Falling, and that whole series I reread, so that's why Samantha Shannon is in there. Same with Alice Osman, I reread Heartstopper to get ready for Heartstopper Volume 4, so I read all of those ones. And Leigh Bardugo, I actually read most of Leigh Bardugo's books for the first time this year, and I've basically just binged both the main series from Leigh Bardugo. So I had read Six of Crows before, but I reread that, Crooked Kingdom, and the Shadow and Bone series as well, so that's why Leigh Bardugo's in there. Okay, and the final bit that I am ready to get stuck into is my star ratings. So I'm just going to give you the overall breakdown of this, and then we're going to delve a little bit deeper. So this stat is coming from Storygraph. Now, because I only started using Storygraph last week or the week before, I've not got any half-star ratings in here because Goodreads doesn't do half-star ratings, Storygraph and Literal do. So these are all kind of lumped into the full star rating. So some of these might be a 3.5 or a 4.5, but for this stat, they're just all kind of within their whole star rating, if that makes sense. So 1 stars, I've got 0, because if it's going to be a 1 star, I'm just going to DNF it, and I don't include DNFs in books I finished for the year. 2 stars, I have got 6 books. I have got 37 3-star books, 63 4-star books, and 22 5-star books. So I'm kind of impressed with that, to be honest. That's a pretty decent spread, but also 4 stars is my most popular rating, which I think is great because that means I'm enjoying loads of the books I'm reading. 37 3 stars, which again shows I don't dislike my 3-star reads, I just don't think they're quite wow enough to be 4 stars. And 22 5 stars, basically highlighting that there's 22 books that I have absolutely loved with my whole heart and soul this year. The 6 2 stars is kind of more than I expected to be in the 2 stars, because when I think about the books I didn't like this year, I can't remember 6 of them that I would put in there within that category. I think the kind of ones that come to mind would be The Christmas Murder Game, which I read last week and was crap, and The Hating Game, but I don't know what else is going to be in there. So for the final part of this video, we're going to have a look at what's in my lowest rated and my highest rated star review system. Okay, so I have got my Storygraph open so you can see all of my stats breakdown. We're going to go into the 2 stars. Now this does include The Christmas Murder Game, but because I popped that in last week, I was able to enter it as a half star, so it's 2.5, so that is here. Okay, alright, so we have got The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin, which I just felt was so disappointing. It was what I would describe as a 5-minute book, which is a book that I feel like might as well have been over in 5 minutes because I just didn't really gain much from it, and I don't really know what the plot even was in the end. It just felt boring and I wanted more from it, so unfortunately that one was in there. Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. This was maybe our first book club pick for my Patreon. It was definitely up there with one of the first, and was just really disappointing for me. I think I need to bear in mind the kind of society changes that I don't know as much information about as obviously I would within a Western society, but for me it felt incredibly sexist in the way it was written and the way it depicted women, and I just couldn't let that go. And I spoke about that at the time, and I had people coming and telling me that I was wrong and that I needed to bear in mind where it was set, when it was written and things. And that's fine, I will completely bear those in mind, but I don't think that can take away from that being my reading experience, so that's why that one's in there. Then we have the exact opposite of Okay by Laura Stephen. This was so bad. It said it was a feminist book and that's why I read it. It's a YA contemporary, and there you go, there's another contemporary, that's where they're coming in. And oh my god, it was just so bad. At one point there was a reference to genitalia, and a penis was called a penis, and a vulva was called a foof. And it was just so frustrating, the fact that we could use correct genitalia to call a penis, but a vulva was called a foof or a foofa or something. And it just, there was many things like that that I just thought was absolutely ridiculous, and it just annoyed me so much. Then we have Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. I can't even remember what this was about. I really didn't like it. I can't remember what it was about. And there's The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which has a toxic relationship with a very intense male lead that is quite inappropriately creepy, and I just didn't like it. It's a very weird, very toxic relationship, and yeah. I do want to watch the film because I want to see if they've portrayed it the same or if they've done something different, but not great. Okay, and let's have a little look at the ones that I rated 5 stars. So there's 22 in here. So I'm gonna go through these a little bit quicker because there's more of them. But The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, fantastic, I loved it. A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J Maas, that was a reread and that is my favourite one in that series and still remains it. Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is set within the Caraval world, but it's a separate book and I just bloody loved it. All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue, that is fantastic. That's a contemporary, or is it a fantasy? I might have put that in as a fantasy. I'm questioning the whole contemporary thing now, but that did have fantasy elements in it, but that was just really good. Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Zhu, that's a graphic novel, loved it. As is Law Olympus by Rachel Smythe, brilliant. A Single Thread of Moonlight, Laura Wood, autobiographer now. And then we've got the Heartstopper books 3 and 2, or 2 and 3 is probably been the correct order to say that, by Alice Osman. The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, which was her debut novel and was fantastic. It's historical crossed with a contemporary and was just so brilliant. Our Violent Ends, Chloe Gong. I'm not over that. It made me cry. I finished it last week. It was just so good. The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. Now, a lot of people did not like this book, but I liked it. It was fun. White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson was just superb. If you want something that is genuinely gonna scare you and just is so creepy, I would highly recommend. Heartstopper Volume 4 by Alice Osman. Kat Dunn's Dangerous Remedy. Oh my god, this was so good. I don't know why I did not put the sequel to this one in my 2022 most anticipated releases because I am so hyped for it. That was such a good book, so good. The second one was amazing too, just loved it. Bridge of Souls by V.E. Schwab, which is book 3 within the Cassie Blake series and is fantastic. Book Love by Debbie Tung, very cute. Under the Whispering Door, TJ Klune, If We Were Villains, ML Rio, both of those so fantastic. ML Rio is just, oh my god, I need to read more by them. Just so good. A Sky Painted Gold by Laura Wood, Wonderland by Juno Dawson, which I've already mentioned is fantastic, and Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, which again, I've already mentioned was fantastic. Also, just a quick addition from Finished Filming Beth. If you did want to look at my top reads of the year in a little bit more detail, I have done a top reads of 2021 video that I will pop up here. So, that's the end of my stats video. This was probably incredibly long. I hope you enjoyed the stats. It was kind of hard to get them into anything but a long video because I wanted to talk about all of these ones, and they're the ones that I found the most interesting to look at. So I really hope you enjoyed it and have enjoyed coming along on my reading journey with me throughout this year. I will of course be logging it into 2022 as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you liked it. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Comment down below how many books you read this year or what your goal is for 2022. I will be doing a separate goals video that will be coming soon. You can subscribe to see more of my face on your feed, and my Patreon is linked down below as well, where you can get lots of extra content from me. Thank you so much for watching. Keep smiling, stay positive, and Happy New Year!